do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and on the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you fast, do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces as to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Today, on Ash Wednesday, we spend time reflecting on our own sinfulness and our own mortality. This morning, at a small graveside service at our columbarium, we buried a former member of St. Mary's. As I tossed dirt onto his remains, I spoke the words, "Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust." In a few moments, you all, our living members and friends, will come up and the clergy will make the sign of the cross with ash on your foreheads and say, "Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return." That, my friends, is why we are gathered here today. That is what Ash Wednesday is about. It's about this collision of death and life in a single moment. We're reminded of our origins. We are part of this earth. We are part of God's creation. We are dust. And ultimately, when this mortal life is over, we will return to dust. I've known people over the years who refuse to go to church on Ash Wednesday or on Good Friday. They say that they don't want to think about death, their own death or Jesus' death. They prefer to focus on the resurrection at all times. Death is hard and sad, and dwelling on it can be difficult. I understand that. It is hard for us to put ashes on the forehead of a child. As we speak the words out loud, in my mind is always a plea to God that comes behind it. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And in my mind, I'm pleading, but please, dear Lord, not for a very, very long time. The flip side of that is the emotions that arise when we place ashes on the forehead of someone whom we know, for reasons of illness or age, may not be here next Ash Wednesday. Facing mortality is hard. It's no wonder that we prefer to focus on the resurrection. Resurrection is joyful and it's filled with wonder and grace. But what people fail to realize sometimes is that in order to get to the resurrection, you have to go through death. This was true for Jesus, and it is true for us. And this is part of the meaning of Lent. We're meant to spend some time focusing on the darker parts of Jesus' story and on the darker parts of our own lives, our own sinfulness. We usually think of death and resurrection in literal terms. When our bodies die, we will somehow mysteriously, wonderfully be resurrected with Christ. And this is true. But death and resurrection can also be understood metaphorically within our lives. Many people describe significant turning points in their lives, finding sobriety, getting out of an abusive relationship, coming through devastating grief or depression, as death and resurrection. And so we hold this tension during Lent. We hold this tension between reflecting on Jesus' death and on our own mortality, while at the same time we undergo intense self-examination to figure out what things in our life might metaphorically need to die in order that we might open ourselves up to the resurrection that God offers us in this life. Our gospel lesson today prepares us for the season of Lent. Jesus reminds the people what they should be doing, giving alms, praying, and fasting. He tells them that they're not to do these things for their own glory, though. They're not to do them in order to be praised by others. Rather, they are to do them in order to further their relationship with God. Each time he says, whenever you do this, give alms, fast, or pray, that section is concluded with the words, "And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." The motivation behind our good works and the motivation behind our prayers matter. Our gospel lesson ends with Jesus saying, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Today, during Ash Wednesday, I think that this passage bears deep reflection. At the end of our lives, when we return to dust, the only thing that will truly matter is our relationship with God through Christ and the legacy that we leave behind in the lives that we've touched. Death is not the end of the story. Resurrection awaits us, but we must go through death in order to get there. Let us prepare our hearts and minds for this Lenten season as we walk this long road with Christ towards death and resurrection. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return.